It's the Bill Huston podcast.
The story so far in plain English. The news media is talking gobbledygook. It's very difficult to understand what's going on if all you do is listen to the news media, okay? You're probably going to be confused about what this thing is and what's going on with the zoning. So I'm going to lay it out in plain English, okay? We're going to break it all down for you, friends. This is a Bill Huston podcast exclusive. You are not going to find this anywhere else, only on the Bill Huston podcast, okay? And this is months worth of research and analysis and doing FOIL requests, investigative journalism. That's what I've been doing since about September of 2019. So let's just get into it, okay? Let's get into the story so far in plain English. The story so far in plain English, all right? So, in plain English, we was robbed. We were robbed of our due process rights. And due process is a constitutional protection, which means that if you have right to a fair trial, for example, and you don't get that, that's a violation of your due process, okay? We deserved in Endicott certain procedural things, and these aren't trivial or unnecessary. These are very, very important things that we were denied in Endicott for this project. Things that we were guaranteed by law. What does it mean when the government, the bureaucrats, the administrators working for the government don't follow the law? What do you do then? Because it's a very unusual situation, right? We expect the government to be the watchdog, to be the collective vehicle for the people's will. And in fact, we end up fighting the government because the government is in bed with industry. And that's no joke. I'm leaving out a lot of important details just to tell you the basic story. So let's begin at the beginning. Now, what happened on May 7th, 2020 is controversial. Despite what you hear in the news, that it wasn't controversial, that the zoning law passed on May 7th. That's what they all say. Universally, all of the local news outlets say the vote passed 3-2. That's controversial. But prior to then, let's talk about prior to May 7th, 2020. Prior to May 7th, 2020, the Endicott Village Code unambiguously had an express prohibition against incinerators in any zone, whether it's a residential zone or a commercial district and industrial. And there's different kinds of things you can do in each of those. Zoning is police powers. So this right here is basically how the government is structured in New York. So it starts with the Constitution, then it goes to the town or the village or the city law. And then there's, underneath there is, in the New York town law, it's Article 16 for zoning. And when you read the enabling statute for the New York town law, Article 16, it talks about promoting the health, safety, morals, or the general welfare of the community, okay? Promoting the health, safety, morals, or the general welfare, health, safety, welfare, okay? And then go read Article 10 about the police. And the police say safety, health, well-being. Kind of sounds similar, doesn't it? Promoting the health, safety, health is in both. And that's no coincidence. Zoning is police powers. The reason why you have zoning is to protect yourself, to protect the people that live in your town or village or county, whatever. And then over here in New York, we also have the environmental conservation law. And underneath there is the permitting authority for the oil and gas wells, which is kind of a conflict of interest. A lot of people say that. But let's just look up here, okay? This is the basis of the SECRA. The State Environmental Quality Review Act is kind of bolted under the environmental conservation law in New York. Not every state has something like secra. Pennsylvania doesn't have anything like secra. Secra isn't bad if people follow it. If you really get into the weeds of it, secra really doesn't have any teeth. Okay? It's only like an advisory thing. It's like, the whole purpose of it is for a particular project is to list the impacts, to find the impacts, to identify the impacts, to iterate them, to list them, and then to propose mitigations or prohibitions via permit conditions. And there's really one other thing. Look at project alternatives. Identify risks, propose specific mitigations via permit conditions. That's an environmental impact statement. That's really the purpose of SECRA, is the EIS, the Environmental Impact Statement. It's the purpose of the State Environmental Quality Review Act. That's what they're getting to. It's the EIS. That's the gold standard. Okay? And the highest level of environmental review in New York is called the Type 1 SECRA. The lowest level is called the Type 2 SECRA. The highest is Type 1. The trivial, minimal, nothing is called a Type 2. And in the middle, there's something called an unlisted action. That's what we got. That's what we always get. That's what we got for stink trucks, too. If you remember the stink trucks that were coming here, bringing the landfill leachate and Dr. Reddy's horse pee, contaminated by a banned gasoline additive, MTBE. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. I wish I were. Okay? So the environmental conservation, if you read the enabling statute of the environmental conservation law, it says enhance the health, safety, welfare. It's the same thing. This is what I want to tell you. Environmental law and zoning both are police powers. Let me say that again because this is super important. If you understand just this one point, you will be so much more well-versed on the New York environmental law than 99% of all people, okay? Environmental law and zoning are all police powers. They're there to protect you, to protect us, to protect the people of the community, okay? Okay, so we was robbed of our due process, and the zoning is central. You're going to see, because this is in plain English. Anybody can understand this. This is going to be super, super, super simple. So back to this. Plain English. Here's a simple fact. You're never going to read this in the Press and Sun Bulletin. You're never going to see it on WBNG. I don't think they've ever said it like this. You won't see it on Fox 40. You won't see it on Spectrum News. You won't see it on News Channel 34. You won't hear it on WNBF unless it's during Bob Joseph and I'm the one telling you. Okay? No news outlet is going to tell you what I'm about to tell you. Okay? Prior to May 7th, 2020, Endicott Village Code had an express prohibition against incinerators. They weren't allowed. Incinerators were not allowed in the village. Period. Okay? Prior to May 7th, what happened on May 7th is controversial. And then it's changed even since the controversy, okay? It's all wonky. But you need to understand this. Prior to May 7th, 2020, Endicott Village Code expressly prohibited incinerators. And if you read the zoning code, section 300, section 22.3c, it says uses not listed and those identified with a dash are expressly prohibited. Endicott Village Code. Okay? There's nothing like an incinerator on that list. We've showed it to you before on other shows. You can go look it up. It's really easy. Just type Endicott Village Code 300-22.3, and then once that comes up, read C. Plug that into DuckDuckGo or Yahoo or MSN. or AOL, whatever you use, Google Endicott Village Code 300-22.3. There's a table. Look at the table. There's nothing like Incinerator, or there's nothing like even a recycling facility. There's nothing like that. Okay? That's what they call it, is a recycling facility. It is a recycling facility, but there is an incinerator component which everybody is trying to hide. And it was the Bill Huston podcast is the one that notified you and notified the community that this was an incinerator. Nobody else was talking about it. And I was getting banned from a whole bunch of, groups on Facebook with the word Endicott in the name. I was getting boink, 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 boink whenever I'd bring up anything like this. Oh, you can't talk about that. That's too controversial. That's political. We're here to share photographs of Endicott from the 1930s. We don't want to talk about anything that matters, that, is going to impact our health and safety. Don't want to talk about that. Group after group after group. I got banned from like 5 different Endicott groups. Okay? We're going to talk about it here on the Bill Huston podcast because this is important. This information has to get out somewhere. And I do this work in the public interest, and I don't get paid to do this exact work. So I rely upon donations and grants. So if you appreciate the work that I do, go down to tinyurl.com/donate to Bill Huston. That takes you to my PayPal, and I'll put up my snail mail. In order to cite the Sunjeel incinerator component of their operations, in order to put it here in Endicott, they had to change the zoning. This is something that the news media has been spreading utter confusion about. Utter confusion. Because they're repeating what Linda Jackson is saying. And Linda Jackson is, I don't know whether she's loopy. I don't think she's loopy, because what she's saying is very, very, very structured. She's sticking to a script almost. I think that there's somebody writing a script and she's just following it, okay? So my question is, who's writing the script? That's what I want to know. Is it Frank Evangelisti? Is it Jason Garner? Is it Empire State Development Corporation? Maybe it's all of them. But there is propaganda happening here. And I'm going to lay it out for you in a minute, okay? It's coming up. If you listen to the news, they talk in gobbledygook. Here is the plain truth. In order to cite the Sunjeel incinerator in Endicott, they had to change the zoning. Okay. The area affected by this required zoning change, and we're talking about the size of Endicott's industrial zone, is about 560 acres. Okay? Now, according to New York law called 6 NYCRR 617.4B2, and it's technically regulation, but regulation has the force of law, the lead agency, DEC, must have used the Type 1 seeker process due to a required zoning change impacting 560 acres. Well, guess what? 500, the threshold is 25 acres. So you have to ask yourself, is 560 greater than 25? Yeah, I think it is. So DEC, in fact, gave us this unlisted seeker action. That's this middle category, okay? It's not the gold standard of the Type 1, and it's not the complete, utter trivial thing like a Type 2 seeker action, okay? The DEC, in fact, gave us an unlisted action. Type 1 seeker is the gold standard, like we said. And you know what? We are Endicott, and our lives matter. Here in Endicott, the lives of our family, lives of our children, and our own lives. Our lives matter in Endicott, okay? And considering the history of toxic contamination that's gone on here, you would think the DEC would be treating us, and the governor, and the Empire State Development Corporation would be treating us with extra sensitive kid gloves, very, very working with us, talking to us. No, they come with a sledgehammer and no lube. That's not the way you treat people. Okay? Now here is the clincher. In our case, a Type 1 seeker is required by law, and that is because of this 560-acre zoning change, according to this law, okay? Because it was 560 acres, that's what's impacted, which is greater than 25. A Type 1 seeker, the gold standard, becomes required by law. The DEC just blew us off. Okay. That's the unlisted seeker. That's the PFAS rework, okay? They just kicked it back a step. I'm getting ahead of the story, okay? We're going to talk about that coming up. This is where the problem is. The problem is right at the very beginning. The zoning change is required by law. They couldn't put the project in the ground without changing the zoning and impacting 560 acres, okay? That's the basis for the Type 1 seeker action. We didn't get a Type 1 seeker action. We didn't get the green path. You know what? If we had gotten the green path, guess what we would have gotten? We would have gotten this pink box right here. That's the one thing we would have gotten. That's the coordinated review. We didn't get a coordinated review. The coordinated review is a county-level review of a project, and it's often called the 239 review. Now, during this review, other agencies are typically involved, and their opinion on the project is sought. And these agencies commonly include the Department of Transportation, local school districts, the Department of Health, the county EMS, and adjacent municipalities. If we had gotten the green path, we would have gotten a coordinated review, and we very likely would have gotten an environmental impact statement. And the environmental impact statement is, it's all these boxes in the red. That's the environmental impact statement, okay? And every time you see an H, that's a public hearing. That is a public hearing. So, how many DEC public hearings did we get? 0. We didn't get any. We got the big 0. Remember Willy Wonka, Gene Wilder? You get nothing! That's Endicott. A Type 1 seeker in this case is required by law. We didn't get it. Oopsie. There are many ways in which an unlisted action process is deficient versus a Type 1 action, and one way is the coordinated review. And a coordinated review is mandatory, and it's not optional for Type 1 actions. We would have definitely got it had we gotten a Type 1 action, which is required by law in this case, because of the zoning change, the required zoning change. Now, what is a coordinated review? Well, it's normally done at the county level, and it typically might involve the Department of Transportation, the Department of Health, County Emergency Management, the school districts. We have 2 in this area, adjacent townships, etc. Okay? DEC's Joseph Dlugolenski said on 10/9/2019 in a form that he filed, and it went in the register, the notice of completed application, that, quote, and a coordinated review was performed. That's what Joseph Dlugolenski said on November 9th of last year. He said a coordinated review was performed. There's just one problem with that. It wasn't true. And Mr. Dlugolenski furthermore said on 10/2, a few days prior, there was, quote, no material conflict with local land use law. Remember, they misclassified this as an unlisted action because they didn't find the zoning. Now they're saying there's no zoning problem. So they missed it, and now they're saying, yeah, there's no zoning problem. And they misclassified it because they got this wrong. So is it malfeasance or is it just incompetence at the DEC? Did they screw up because they're just like, woo, 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 woo? They're just like being silly and stupid and not doing their work? Or is it worse? Are they enclosed? Are they enclosed by industry? Are they working for industry? It kind of seems that way to me. From the outside, it does. I'm sure these people are all very, very, very nice people. I don't mean to make a personal attack. I'm just saying what happened. These are the facts in plain English. Okay? I'm not going to mess around, beat around the bush. I'm not going to use vague language. I'm not going to talk about, the village of Endicott is contemplating rescinding the special restrictions that they put on the zoning code. Oh, that just gives me a headache when I hear that stuff. That's such gobbledygook. We're going to sort it out for you, friends, on the Bill Huston podcast. And this is the only place where you're going to get the story so far in plain English. All right. The DEC misclassified this as an unlisted seeker action because they failed to do their due diligence and discover the zoning issue. It took me about 8 minutes on Google. I don't even think it was 8 minutes. It could have been more like 8 seconds. You type in some keywords into Google. I found it online. This guy could have found it online. He could have verified all of this. Or worse, they knew about the zoning issue and they just pushed through anyway. I don't know. Are they incompetent or are they crooked? I don't know of any other categories. The involvement of the mainstream media here, and this is what we're going to get into too tonight, the local corporate for-profit broadcast media is very interesting. And one of the things that you can see I've gone over the whole history of this, a couple of years worth of history, news articles, and logging everything on the timeline. I've gotten a lot of FOIL documents that most of them are out there on the Dropbox. You can find it. Just go to tinyurl.com/Endicott Battery Incinerator, and you can find lots and lots and lots of official documents. This is what I do. I make these documents available for journalists and researchers and just concerned citizens. So the mainstream media plays a critical function here, and I've studied all of this, in terms of media theory, media analysis, and structural analysis, and all this stuff. I've studied this stuff for years. But it's a whole other thing to watch it happen live in front of your face. Okay? It was like the time when Tariq Abdelazim was debating Jason Garner for county. I think it was Jason Garner for county executive down at the Traditions at the Glen, and it was Lou Santoni and his buddies at the Binghamton Chamber that were hosting the event, and they put me in my place and said.
And we're just saying we're not allowing videotaping of the entire program.
I'm having trouble understanding that. These are candidates for public office.
Right, and you're welcome to do pre-interviews. You're welcome to interview after. You're welcome to take some.
Is Fox 40 going to air the whole thing on TV?
No, we're not. No. We didn't make any arrangements with any media or audio, video to, have any videographers here other than covering for news story purposes.
But you're not going to record the whole thing or you're going to be asked to leave. I'm like, wait a minute. This is the only debate of a couple of candidates for major public office, regional public office in this area, and you're not going to let me record it? And I'm like, what about the TV news? And they're like, they're going to turn their cameras off. And that's when it was like somebody dumped ice water down my back. That's what it felt like. I got this cold chill. Because I realized at that moment, and I knew all this intellectually beforehand. I studied it, Independent Media Center, all that stuff. I studied it. I know all this stuff. I know that the local media outlets, the corporate for-profit media outlets, are all working for the business chamber. And they accomplish this several different ways. They accomplish it through advertising. They accomplish it through interwoven boards of directors. They accomplish it with stock ownership. And there's probably other ways they accomplish it, okay? The mainstream, and also anything that has just an anti-business kind of vibe to it is going to be censored. It's going to be censored hard, okay? The only thing that's really going to be permitted is pro-business, because of structural issues with how our media system is structured from the get-go. And the history to read, I think it's there's two different books by Robert McChesney. I think the one is called The Problem of the Media, or The Problem with the Media. One of those two. I think it's The Problem of the Media. Get that book. It had a yellow cover when I got it. The Problem of the Media by Robert McChesney. And it talks about the history of like the socialist media systems that arose in England and Canada versus the capitalist system that we have today. And now I'm not even going to get into any kind of performance analysis of the CBC or the BBC. And I know the BBC has a lot of corruption in it, just like NPR. I think the CBC still does pretty good, but they're pretty biased towards things like tar sands. The point is, the mainstream media, they're owned by corporations. The broadcast licenses are owned by corporations. And the which is supposed to be forbidden. No entity is supposed to own the license or own the airwaves. You can look that up. That's in the law. I forget the citation. They're working for the chamber. Every one of them. WBNG, Press Connects, Press and Sun Bulletin, News Channel 34, Fox 40, Spectrum News. I left out WSKG and Clear Channel because neither one of them really do a news program now. So, I guess. Concerning WSKG, it turns out to be not so easy to do a petition to deny against WSKG, even though they suck, mostly. Even though they suck hard, mostly. It's still hard. Because everybody loves their classical music. Everybody loves their NPR. Ding, 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 ding. All things considered. Ding, 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 ding. Except anything that indicts Archer Daniels Midland or Coca-Cola Corporation or any of the their underwriters that purchase the commercials. Oops, not commercials. I mean, enhanced underwriting announcements. That's what I meant to say, not commercials. The mainstream media, they're not here. We get confused. We look at the people, the nice people. They show up on our TV screens every night and they read us the news, and we think, oh, they're such good people, because they're here. They're here to help us and to inform us. And that is actually, how these people are personally is really different than how they are in the performance of their jobs. How they are, there's a certain corporate imperative. There's a certain thing they want you to do. If you want to take that job, this is what they're going to want. You basically do what you're told. You do what the station owner tells you to do in terms of editorializing. It's not supposed to happen. I'm telling you it does. I'm telling you it does. And I've seen it with my own eyes over and over and over and over again. The for-profit broadcast media is not there to inform you. It's there to disinform you. It's there to propagandize you and to censor the truth from your view. That's their goal. That's their mission. On behalf of the business class. They want to put their ideas into your head via public relations, via advertising. It's the same thing. Same techniques, different goals. Urging somebody to choose brand X as opposed to brand Y of shampoo when you're standing there in front of the grocery store and you're trying to pick. That's one kind of thing that they might want to influence you to do. They also might want to influence you to vote for a particular political candidate or to back some specific legislation, which they're also not supposed to do. The for-profit broadcast media, from my observations, here's what I saw. They are working in cahoots with Jason Garner and Donna Lupardo, Cheryl Chapman and Linda Jackson, Mayor Linda Jackson, are all working in cahoots with I don't know who. I don't know who's the puppet master. I don't know where this stuff is coming from. I can guess. I got a pretty good idea. I can't see it with my own eyes directly. It's hidden from my view. But what I'm going to tell you is it's very odd when Linda Jackson and Donna Lupardo and Jason Garner are all saying the exact same thing. They're all saying the exact same thing, for one. Number two, it's all wrong in the same way. And number three, it seems to kind of serve an industrial agenda, which makes me very suspicious. Okay, let's get into what I'm talking about. Do I have anybody actually watching this? I'm just going to check the chat really quick. Check it out. Yeah, Scott, hope you do. I apologize. 10-minute top. Yep. That's fine. Okay. So it looks like there's still 2 people watching. They're probably both me. That's okay, because I'm going to do an edit of this. And my screen looks a little choppy. So let's get into what we're talking about, okay? First of all, let's remember what I'm trying to get to here is that this is what they're telling, or this is how they behave. All of the politicians and the news media and the people working directly for the applicant, they're all saying the same thing. They never say the word incinerator, or extremely rarely. Okay, the news media has been doing a good job. I've been trying to spike certain ideas and words into the news media. It's really hard, but little by little we're making some progress. Not as quick as I'd want to make, but I'm still grateful. They don't tell you it's an incinerator. They want to keep you confused. They want to deny it utterly. Linda Jackson, this is not an incinerator. She's been on the news media and in emails and social media so many times. It's not an incinerator. The hell it's not. The hell it's not. We've got all the documentation. The EPA says it's an incinerator. The DEP regional engineer Thomas Elter says it's an incinerator. Judith Inc., former EPA administrator for Region 2, she says it's an incinerator. Dr. Paul Connett, internationally recognized expert on hazardous waste incinerators, He's traveled all over the globe and travels frequently, or he would be traveling if it wasn't for this COVID thing, and educating people about the hazards of incinerators. He's an expert. He lives just down the road in Binghamton. He's been helping us. He's fabulous, okay? So they always say it's a manufacturing or a recycling facility or a manufacturing facility. They never see incinerator. They always conflate it with Imperium 3, which is presently a no-show, and it's a possible DOA. Okay, it's possible dead on arrival. That's how I'm calling it right now. I think Imperium 3 is dead on arrival. And how many millions? Mark Bacon says 17 million. Is that right? He's like, where did the money go? Where did the money go? Did they get 17 million? I think it's a little bit high. We need to look into that further. And Nobel laureate Stan Whittingham. They conflate the incinerator with Stan Whittingham. Stan Whittingham's Nobel Prize was in chemistry for developing the lithium-ion battery. Stan Whittingham's expertise is not the chemistry of incinerators. It's just not. So I'm going to reach out to Stan Whittingham, Dr. Whittingham, and see if he'll answer a couple of my questions. Most of the news articles, Jeff Platsky just did this in the Press and Sun Bulletin the other day, okay? He doesn't say the opponents of the incinerator. He calls them opponents of recycling. And Fox 40 did this too, opponents of recycling. They all say it. Who's writing that common message and fanning it out? Is it some PR firm? Is it Edelman? Is it Dr. Evil? What's his name? Rick Berman? Is it Hill and Knowlton? They're the most famous ones. Public relations firms. That's who comes up with this kind of stuff. Public relations firms, okay? It's gobbledygook. So this is my favorite, okay? Now, when they're talking about the required zoning change, instead of saying in plain English, they wanted to remove, this is prior to May 7th, they wanted to remove the prohibition on incinerators, okay? Instead of saying that, what are you doing? Why are you changing the zoning? Oh, we want to remove the express prohibition on incinerators. That's what they really are trying to do. But would they actually say that? No. What do they say? They say we are adding special restrictions and regulations on recycling facilities. And if you only knew how absurd that is, that's like having a wall, like a 6-foot stone wall between you and the outside world, which protects you against bears, and it protects you against bows and arrows and 22 caliber guns. The wall is there to protect you. They removed the wall and they called it adding special restrictions. It's double talk. It's public relations double talk. And it's coming out of the mayor's mouth, and all the mainstream media are repeating it. And also, another thing they're all doing is they denied that the zoning change had anything to do with the Sunjeel facility. This is another example where the mayor's saying this completely ridiculous, clearly false thing, and the news media prints it uncritically, or they just put it out there uncritically. No fact-checking involved. And she repeats, oh, it was already permitted way back in the last administration. And sometimes she'll say November, December, January. She gets a little mixed up. I think it's all BS myself. that it wasn't already permitted. It didn't have the friggin' DEC permit until March 30th. There still isn't a building permit been issued. And then over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Social media, personal emails, on the phone, in person, over and over and over and over, to the news media, over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. The same thing. There's nothing the village can do. How many times did you hear them say that on the news? There's nothing the village can do. Sunjil's already here. This is a private business. We can't say what goes on inside of a private business. Ted Warner always brings up, if that's the case, then anybody could rent out to an adult bookstore on the avenue, and that's against the zoning. You still have to follow the zoning. So there is several things, at least two, that the village can do. So Linda Jackson says this bogus, untrue thing, and the news media just repeats it. Blah, 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 as if it's gospel. And it's wrong. So here, there were several stages where we could have blocked it. One is that the village could fail to change the zoning. Zoning is police powers. The village has a right to keep out toxic, hazardous waste facilities from its downtown area if it wants to. Communities have the right to say no. The laws are being whittled and whittled and whittled away to try to take away people's right to say no. They try to make it so that you have to say yes, and there's only permit conditions you can try to negotiate. There's nothing we can do. That's wrong. There's lots we can do. We can not change the zoning, which, once again, the mayor used to say, oh, that's got nothing to do with the plant. It's 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 got everything to do with the plant. The zoning change is front and center. Like I just showed you, you got to go all the way back to the beginning to be able to see it. So the village could fail to change the zoning. The other thing is that code enforcement could fail to issue the building permit for any valid legal reason. There's several different reasons why code enforcement could turn down a building permit. Maybe it's the character of the applicant. Maybe it's they're financially insolvent. You wouldn't want to, or maybe they've been in a lot of legal problems in the past. You wouldn't want a permit for a company like that. You wouldn't want a permit for a company of shysters. So I'm just saying there's a lot of public relations at work here. This is the County 239 review, okay? So April 16th, it was a real rush job, written by Frank Evangelisti. Didn't go before the full board. Now he says that they haven't identified any countywide issues, even though there was no coordinating agencies. Typically there's 6 or 7. But this is what I want to point out to you. This is something that nobody is talking about. Nobody. The attorney is talking about it. Claudia Bramer, the attorney for No Burn Broom. I can show you a letter that she wrote on 5/7 where she brought up this very issue. Okay? So this is a real issue. I'm not making this up. That the 239 review, basically, if they ignore any recommendations, if the 239 review, the county comes back and gives you recommendations and you ignore them, guess what? You got to have a supermajority vote or an extraordinary vote, which is same thing. It means supermajority. If you ignore the recommendations. Now, are these recommendations? They're comments. The village should consider, is this a recommended change or not? That's what people are arguing about. It's kind of a letter of the law argument. Basically, the county is saying, as deficient as this 239 review is, and it is deficient, and it's highly unusual, it's out of order. For example, the seeker review was done after this. The seeker review should have come first. It should have been included in the application packet to the county. Okay? It wasn't. Lots of stuff was wrong with this. Okay? So, as deficient as this 239 review is, this is good stuff. And so here, let's look at these one by one. So what the county is saying is the village should consider adopting supplementary use requirements for recycling facilities, special use permit and or site plan review requirements. Yeah. Right now they're talking like there might not even be a site plan review because it's all up to the code inspector right now. Add a supplementary use requirement for shredding, smelting, and furnace or incinerator burning. Good idea. I agree with that. Let's make it explicit. What are we doing? Are we shredding? Or are we smelting, furnace, or incinerator burning? Or are we disassembling and processing processes? Because it all based on the word process. That the new zoning change talks about processing batteries. Well, it's a kind of a vague term. What are you processing? What are you doing? You waving a magic wand over them, or are you burning it at 900 degrees C? Compliance with DOT transportation guidelines. Good idea. Air emission standards, air pollution control measures, and state-of-the-art standards and air quality monitoring, outdoor storage and stockpiling, fire avoidance. These are all good recommendations, and the village just ignored them. Guess what? The zoning, all the newspapers are reporting that the zoning passed 3-2 on May 7th. It didn't pass 3-2. It failed 3-2 because this right here is a supermajority requirement because they ignored all of this, okay? But it gets even crazier. We already talked about that. Compare Fenton. The 239 review for the zoning change for the battery incinerator, just the zoning change, not for the facility. They never did a 239 review or any kind of coordinated review for the facility. But the Fenton 239 review was 6 agencies and 37 pages. Ours was 0 agencies. 0 coordinating agencies? Really? Not the DOT? Not Department of Health? Not the town of Vestal, not the town of Union, not the Union Endicott Central School District, not Seton Catholic School District. That's hurting my brain. None of that was done, okay? So this triggered a 4-1 extraordinary supermajority vote requirement under GML 239M subsection 5. You can go look that up. And there's also this protest petition, which also potentially triggers the 230 a supermajority vote. That's what they're all trying to. They need to hire somebody to figure this out. I don't know why they just don't take it to the county. The county has GIS people already on staff. We don't have to hire anybody. Maybe the county would help us out with this. Whatever. Looks like they've already voted to hire an outside engineering firm. I don't remember who it is. It's not B&L. Surprisingly, decided to vote for the other guy. So all the local media said that the zoning change was approved 3-2 with no mention of the controversy. Local media have a general rule to hear both sides. Well, we're going to show you later after this segment, we're going to go into some news media analysis. And we're going to show you that quite a few times they make special exceptions for that when it's like an industrial press release, which they print like good stenographers. They just repeat it uncritically and without counterpoint. If they ever talk to me, they're always like, whatever I say, like when I talked to Jessica Kislick with Fox 40 a couple weeks ago. Every time I said something, she'd come back and say, well, I'm going to have to ask the mayor about that. So you interview like somebody like me, just a regular citizen, you got to like give the other side a chance to rebuke it or rebut it. Doesn't work the same way if you're industry. or if you're a politician. You get to say whatever you want to, and they don't fact check it. They're not critical, and very often they print what the official source says uncritically and without counterpoint. So the local media also often reports Mayor Jackson's false and illogical statements uncritically and without fact-checking. Okay, on May 15th, there was this amazing letter by Fred Akshar, which was actually quite good, and he wrote it to his Republican colleague, Mayor Linda Jackson, and said, "Why don't you listen to the people?" He said, "Listen, Linda, Fred Akshar, Republican senator, state senator, tells Linda Jackson, hey, maybe you should listen, Linda, to what the people are saying." Then, not to be outdone, on May 18th, Donna Lupardo sent her own letter to DEC Commissioner Basil Segos, only it's complete gaslighting. So this is Donna Lupardo's gaslighting letter. Everybody's saying, oh, yay, Donna Lupardo wrote a letter. It's kind of amazing getting her to write a letter, because I've written her before lots of times and tried to get her to do stuff, and she wouldn't. So this is actually kind of good that she wrote something. Lets you know that she doesn't have writer's cramp or something. I've received many questions from constituents regarding the Sungeo battery recycling facility slated for Endicott. While this project was viewed favorably when it was announced, by who? The village didn't even know about it. People around here didn't even know about it for over a year after it was already announced. Press release, Empire State Development Corporation with your name on it, Jason Garner, the former mayor. While this project was viewed favorably by the people pushing the project, of course they viewed it favorably, when it was announced, it was seen by many, weasel words, seen by many, these unidentified experts, there are many, as a green jobs initiative and using a green manufacturing process. Don't you love it how Donna Lupardo tries to label a hazardous waste incinerator as a green manufacturing process? Talk about gaslighting. That is wacky. An incinerator, a hazardous waste, e-waste incinerator, is not a green manufacturing process, Donna Lupardo. That's wackiness. That's BS. That's industry, public relations, okay? I appreciate the efforts that your department has undertaken thus far on the project. Yeah, to misclassify it as an unlisted seeker action and to deny us our due process rights to a coordinated review and to public hearings, typically 4, and an environmental impact statement. Denied to Endicott because these people violated the law. Here's Donna Lupardo praising the lawbreakers. I appreciate your efforts your department has taken thus far on the project, including going through the permitting process, even though the company had qualified for a simpler registration. Okay, let's put an end to this. This has been repeated over and over and over again by people in the DEC and Donna Lupardo and others. That, you know, Linda Jackson calls it 2 permits. This is why they did the second permit. There was no second permit, okay? What she's talking about is when they first applied, they applied for this thing called a registration, which is it's limited paperwork and a super limited environmental review. And then they bumped it up to something they call an air state facility permit, which is kind of serious, but doesn't quite meet Title V thresholds, which is the real. That's the major source, is the Title V thresholds. And in my opinion, it's questionable whether this thing should be Title V or not. We're going to skip the Title V question for a moment. Here she's saying, repeating this statement, which we've heard lots of people repeat, that they qualified for a simpler registration, for a much simpler registration. The permitting, even though the company had qualified for the simpler registration, No, they didn't. That's wrong. And we're going to prove that to you today, friends. I'm going to show you the document. So this is a letter from March, dated March 18, 2019. It's to Dale Vollmer of Plumley Engineering. And it's from a guy called Thomas Elter. Thomas Elter, here's the guy that signed it. He is a professional engineer with New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Here's Thomas Elter. Okay? Region 7 Air Pollution Control Engineer. So here he goes on, and there's long discussion about incinerators, the EPA's incinerator rule. So there's actually been somebody recently in one of the groups, one of the Endicott groups, has been talking about, this is not an incinerator. I thought we were done with this. Apparently we're not. People are still saying this is not an incinerator. Okay, well here it is. Thomas Elter from the DEC is talking about this is likely going to qualify under EPA's incinerator rule. Okay? There it is in plain writing. A lot of discussion about that. And also, by the way, they're saying a pyrolysis unit. Pyrolysis is oxygen-deprived burning. This is like, when I think about pottery, I've known my ex was a potter and used to fire things in a kiln. I know there's this reduction process, and that means, using up all the oxygen. It's a chemical process that's in an oxygen-starved environment, so they call that a reduction process. Here, when you're talking about incinerators, they call it pyrolysis, but it's the same thing. It's an oxygen-starved process. So then they're saying the need for an oxidizer was unclear. Oxidation sometimes can make harmful things less harmful. They can change the form. You can't change ions. You can't change things, a sulfur atom. You can't destroy a sulfur atom. You can heat it up. You can separate ions from more complicated compounds with high enough energy levels, which is what they're doing here. Super high heat furnace, okay? It's between 1,000 and 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. That's how hot it is. Super hot. And he's like, I have since learned that the lithium-ion batteries contain fluorine, arsenic, chlorine, boron, sulfur, and organic material that will volatilize. Guess what that means? Goes up into the air. Goes up into the smokestacks. And by the way, this letter, as you can see, is from March 18th of 2019. That was over a year ago. And Thomas Elter is talking about the potential. The Department of Environmental Conservation, DEC, also requires that SMCC to address the potential formation of dioxin in the dryer. And then here's what he says. Additionally, the DEC is informing you of our decision to upgrade the application from a registration to a state facility permit. DEC has concluded that given the complexity of the control equipment, a state facility permit will be required. Do you see that? Will be required. Now let's go back and read what Donna Lupardo wrote. Because she made it sound like it was all discretionary. Like, oh yeah, just because the department, because we care, because the DEC cares about you, we're going to make them do. They don't have to, but they will. Even though the company had qualified for the simpler registration. That's a little disingenuous, Donna. You also extended the public's comment period at my request and provided the March 29th response document, which I have shared with many constituents, that ignored all of our primary concerns. It just ignored them. Okay? Which I have with many constituents. And given the history of industrial contamination in this part of the community, you can see that our concerns still exist. Anyway, I just wanted to show this to you briefly and just point out that Donna Lupardo is in this thing deep. Donna Lupardo is deep into this thing, and she's not really backing down. She wrote this letter to make it look like she's doing something and that she cares, but she's continuing this gaslighting, calling it a green manufacturing process, calling an incinerator a green manufacturing process. Give me an effing break. Give me a break. That's ridiculous, and it's gaslighting, and it's bogus. And then on 5/20, the DEC pulls back the permit. This is a little bit weird, okay? This is a little bit odd that the DEC would, just on their own action, withdraw the permit. They said, we're going to make some changes regarding these PFAS compounds, these poly and perfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS. They just pulled the permit back. And they said, we're going to make some changes. We're going to open it up to public comment. And then we'll issue the permit. Okay? And I showed you what that looked like previously. And then on June 1st, the mayor at the village board meeting, first one of June, the mayor stated their intention to withdraw the zoning change. But she did it in such a strange way. Such a strange way. It wasn't like, hey, you know when we removed the prohibition to incinerators? Let's take that back. No, she called it adding restrictions. So she framed it in a way that the village is going to remove the special restrictions that we added. Well, it wasn't special restrictions. They threw away the barrier. So they're going to put the barrier back. So, but she had to explain it in such a convoluted way. It was like the village is basically voting to rescind. We have some news articles coming up, and you're going to see how convoluted the people try. They're like, oh, what do I do with this? It doesn't make any sense. And when the poor TV news people tried to explain it, came out as just like, what the? You could tell it was bogus because they couldn't make any sense of it. I would love Donna Lupardo to be the person that everybody claims that she is. I would love to have evidence that Donna Lupardo is the environmentalist that people claim she is. I want to see evidence of it, though. I can't keep believing in pixie dust. I'm all into metaphysics and the power of positive intention. I am. And I've seen it work, but I've been dealing with Donna for probably close to 15 years, if not longer, and I just don't see it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't like the name call, but Donna Lupardo seems like she's pretty corrupt to me. Be sure to hit the like button, friends. Thumbs up this video and share it out, please. And don't forget to subscribe to the Bill Huston podcast on YouTube. Click on the bell and select all notifications. And please donate if you can to support my work. Donations in any amount are greatly appreciated.